Finally, please use the chat box located on the bottom right of your screen to send questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please enter your questions in the chat box located on the bottom right hand of your screen. Next slide, please. So today's agenda will cover two key areas. First, ordinance requirements, and second, ordinance resources. And then finally, as I mentioned, there will be a Q&A session. So please enter your questions in that chat at the lower right-hand side of your screen. Next slide. So ordinance basics first. What does this ordinance require? So here's a quote from the ordinance in the Municipal Code of Chicago, and I'll read it aloud. In connection with any delivery or takeout order of food or beverage, a food dispensing establishment may only provide single-use foodware on request from the customer or at a self-service station. And that is a quote from Municipal Code of Chicago, section 4-8-065 sub A. This requirement, this ordinance, is effective January 18th, 2022. That is next Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. That is the effective date. Next slide. So what I just read, what does that really say? What does it require? So in plain language, what it's saying, and I'll read this aloud, is for any delivery or takeout order, an establishment may only provide single-use foodware if the customer requests it, or if the single-use foodware is made available at a self-service station. And establishments that offer single-use foodware must provide options for the customers to request it from the establishment. And again, this is effective January 18th, 2022. That's next Tuesday. Next slide. So there are a couple of key considerations here in what I just described, and those are five. First is that this only applies to delivery or takeout orders of food or beverage. So if it is not a delivery or takeout order of food or beverage, this ordinance does not apply. Number two, it only applies to food dispensing establishments. And that is, the food dispensing establishment is a defined term in the municipal code. And so we'll go into some detail on what exactly is a food dispensing establishment. Number three, of course, it is called the Single-Use Foodware Ordinance. So we'll go into some detail on what exactly is single-use foodware, what is included in single-use foodware and what is not included in single-use foodware. Number four, this is an important point, maybe the most important point here, is that the ordinance requires that food dispensing establishments only provide single-use foodware upon request from the customer. So the customer must affirmatively request the single-use foodware for it to be provided, and the establishment must offer options for the customer to make that affirmative request. So that's number four here. And number five is there is one exception, so to speak, to that number four, request from the customer, which is if the single-use foodware is available at a self-service station at the establishment. Next slide. So first, number one, going back to that quote from the ordinance, the basic requirement of the ordinance is that this only applies in connection with any delivery or takeout order of food. So if it is not a delivery or takeout order, this requirement does not apply. The ordinance does not apply. Next slide. Second is that the ordinance applies to food dispensing establishments. And so what is a food dispensing establishment? As I mentioned, a food dispensing establishment, that is a defined term in the code. And food dispensing establishments include restaurants, coffee shops, cafeterias, and this is a long list, but I'll go through it. Short order cafes, luncheonettes, grills, tea rooms, sandwich shops, soda fountains, taverns, bars, cocktail lounges, nightclubs, industrial feeding establishments, takeout establishments, private institutions or organizations routinely serving food, catering kitchens, commissaries, or any other eating or drinking establishment or operation. So this is a very broad definition. It is in the municipal code. Really, it's saying any fixed establishment that's offering food or beverage to customers. That is what a food dispensing establishment is. This ordinance applies to food dispensing establishments that are in connection with any delivery or takeout order, as I mentioned. Next slide. Now, the crux of it is single-use foodware, of course. So what is single-use foodware? And that's defined in the code as well. And so I'll read that definition. Single-use foodware means any eating utensil or other item to be used as part of food or beverage service that is designed and intended by the manufacturer for only one usage before being discarded. And so this definition includes forks, spoons, sporks, knives, chopsticks, other eating utensils, stirrers, drink stoppers, splash sticks, cocktail sticks, toothpicks, napkins, wet wipes, cup sleeves, beverage trays, disposable plates, and condiment packets. So that is what single-use foodware is. Next slide. There are a couple things that single-use foodware is not, and that's also defined in the code. So single-use foodware does not include straws and beverage lids. Single-use foodware also does not include items used to contain or package food or beverages for delivery or takeout orders. So that's the actual container that's containing the food, allowing the customer to take it away. And any other kind of container or package allowing the customer to take that order away, that is not considered single-use foodware, nor are straws or beverage lids. Next slide. Another very important part of this ordinance is that single-use foodware may only be provided upon request from the customer. This could take a number of forms, but the key here is that the customer affirmatively request the single-use foodware before it be provided by the food dispensing establishment. And as part of the ordinance does say that food dispensing establishments shall provide options for customers to affirmatively request that single-use foodware when the customer is ordering food and beverages for delivery or takeout across all ordering or point of sale platforms. So that's whether it's in store at a counter, whether it's over the phone, whether it's on an app, whether it's online or otherwise, all points of sale platforms. The food dispensing establishment must offer some kind of option for customers to affirmatively request the single-use foodware. So you can imagine that could take a number of different forms, and I'll go into one of those forms in just a moment. But the key here is, again, that the food dispensing establishment must provide that option. So whether that's the person taking the order asking, would you like with this order your single-use foodware, your fork, knife, napkin, what have you, whether it's a drop down on a website, that is not the form that option takes is not prescribed in the ordinance. The key is that the option be provided by the food dispensing establishment. And secondly, of course, that the customer affirmatively request the single-use foodware before it is provided in connection with any delivery or takeout order. However, there is one quote unquote or associated with this, and that's the last clause of this quote here. So next slide. Apologies. Before I get there, let me just point out that there is a sign made available by the city that counts as essentially an option, providing the customer an option to affirmatively request the single-use foodware. So this sign, as I'll get to later, is available on the city's website for download and for use. Next slide. So apologies about that. The last clause I wanted to touch on here was that there is an exception of sorts that if single-use foodware is offered at a self-service station, then the customer request and the option is no longer at play. So self-service station means an area dedicated to customers taking away single-use foodware and condiments. So if those single-use foodware items and condiments and whatnot are offered at a self-service station at the food dispensing establishment, the customer can go at their will and at their prerogative and take those single-use foodware items without having to affirmatively request it or be offered the option to take them and what have you. Next slide. There are a number of specific exceptions in this ordinance. There are 6 exceptions, and I'll go through them one by one. So the first exception is when single-use foodware is necessary to address safety concerns. This includes drink lids, stoppers, beverage trays, cup sleeves, but only for beverages served at over 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Number two is automatic food vending machines. So if the single-use foodware comes through an automatic food vending machine with the food, then that is an exception to this ordinance. Number three is if the single-use foodware is pre-packaged or attached to any food or beverage product by the manufacturer prior to receipt by the food establishment. So if it comes from the manufacturer, wrapped, food and single-use foodware wrapped together, that is an exception if it comes from the manufacturer in that manner. Number four, exception number four is charitable food dispensing establishments. And charitable food dispensing establishments, that is also a defined term in the code specifically. And what it is, how it's defined is any not-for-profit fixed location where food or drink is routinely provided for the public for consumption on or off premises without charge. And such establishments include, but are not limited to, food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, child and adult care feeding program sites, and summer food service program sites. So this is a specific exception defined in the code for charitable food dispensing establishments, Exception number five is single-use foodware provided in connection with a drive-through. So in other words, if there is a drive-through window and a drive-through area for cars to pull up, meals or food provided through that window may come with single-use foodware without the need for that affirmative request. It is an exception. However, the rest of the establishment would still be covered by the ordinance. So just because there is a drive-through window on the backside of an establishment does not mean that if an order for delivery or takeout is placed via phone or at the front counter of that establishment away from the drive-through window, those orders would still fall within this ordinance. Exception number six is food dispensing establishments within O'Hare or Midway airports. Next slide. There is a violation and penalty contemplated for this ordinance. The penalty for violation of the single-use foodware ordinance is a fine not less of $200 nor more than $1,000 for each offense, and that is in the municipal code, section 4-8-068. That's a general fine for generally food establishment violations for that entire chapter of the code. Next slide. So finally, there are a couple important resources for this ordinance, namely three. One is the sign that I had on the slide a couple slides ago on the screen. The second is an FAQ document with a couple of frequently asked questions and answers. And number three is the recording of this webinar, which will go up online following the webinar. And all of these resources are available on BACP's website at www.chicago.gov/BACP. Once you're at the BACP website, click on licensing. There's a large icon that says licensing. You click on that, and then within the licensing page, at the very top of the page, there are trending topics. There's just a couple trending topics, and one of them will be single-use foodware. So click on that, and you'll get to a page with the sign for download and printing, the FAQ document for reference, and finally, a little later, the webinar recording from today will be up on the website. Next slide. So with that said, we'll open it up to questions. Stella, if you can take a look at what folks have put in the chat, and a reminder that the chat is at the bottom right hand side of your screen. So please put questions there, and we'll be happy to answer them to the best of our abilities.
Okay, we do have some questions. First question, how is drive-through classified? Would that be considered a takeout order or not?
So the important thing with drive-throughs to remember is that the drive-through facility, meaning the window and where the car pulls up, orders placed there are exempt. That is an exception from this ordinance. So it's not really relevant whether that order is a considered a delivery or takeout order. The key there is that it is taking place at a drive-through window, and that is an exception to the ordinance.
Does a walk-up service window constitute as a drive-through?
That's a good question. That I will take under advisement, and we will get back to you on that. If you don't mind also emailing that question to BACP outreach at cityofchicago.org, that would be helpful, but we will get back to you on that specific question.
Can you share the link to the ordinance?
Yes, on the web page that I just described, the ordinance is also linked there, the actual ordinance language. So if you go to www.chicago.gov/BACP, you go to licensing, trending topics, single-use foodware, a link to the ordinance will be, it is on that page currently. And you can click on that and it'll link right to the PDF of the actual ordinance language. Yeah.
NBC5 reported this morning that this was optional for restaurant owners and would not be enforced.
The ordinance will be enforced. It is a code requirement, as it is in the municipal code. So because it is in the code within this chapter 4.8, there will be enforcement on a complaint basis, as there is with all city ordinances.
What about restaurants that only have single-use foodware? How long do they have to make the change?
So the ordinance goes into effect on January 18th, 2022. That's next Tuesday. So upon the effective date, the requirements of the ordinance do apply, and that is January 18th, 2022.
Does this apply to coffee drink stations and offices?
It depends, I guess, on what the coffee drink station, what function it's serving and how it's established. If it is a food dispensing establishment, meaning a fixed location that's offering food and beverage, then it would be covered. But what I would consider a coffee and drink station in an office would be simply a break room, a kitchen, whatnot. That would not be covered by this ordinance. And in any case, as most coffee and drink stations, whether in offices or not, often do provide that the self-service station. Remember that self-service stations are exempt from the ordinance either way. So if single-use foodware is provided at that self-service station, no affirmative request is needed, no option for the customer to affirmatively request is needed. It's simply available at that self-service station.
If we receive a complaint from a resident that an establishment is in violation of the ordinance once it's in effect, how do we report it?
So any complaint for any city ordinance and any service request to the city can be filed through the city's 311 system. So you can dial 311 if you're within the city, or use the CHI 311 app. That's a mobile app. And that holds true for really any and all complaints across all city ordinances and for all service requests. That's the 311 system.
If a customer walks into the restaurant and places a to-go order, does this ordinance apply to that order?
Yes, it does. That would be a to-go order would be considered a takeout order, and the ordinance is does apply to delivery and takeout orders.
Is this just for Chicago, or does it extend to the suburban areas in Cook County?
No, this ordinance is a Chicago city ordinance within the Chicago Municipal Code, and as such, it only applies to Chicago.
Can we have the sign of the ordinance information and Q&A in Spanish to distribute to our restaurants in Little Village?
Yes, thank you for raising that. The materials will be provided in Spanish on that same webpage in short order.
With all my respect, what is the difference between the past practice and now? Usually, they ask if you need plasticware, and obviously they are disposable. So is the banner the only thing that has to be done?
That's a good question. So a lot of establishments might already be in compliance with this ordinance if they are offering an option for a customer to affirmatively request single-use foodware and only providing single-use foodware upon that affirmative request. That's in compliance with the order. And some establishments might very well, as a matter of business practice, have been doing that previously in answer to your question. The sign, we encourage, the city does encourage establishments to post that sign and use that sign. So that is an added resource at this point for establishments to employ.
Once in the Shy 311 app, what is the type code for breaking this ordinance?
So the type code within the Shy 311 app, it will be under business complaint, I believe is the title of the complaint code. However, within your complaint, if you specify what the complaint is about, it will get routed to the right spot.
If we comply with this city ordinance and we recycle as required by the city, and we compost all organic waste, then all restaurants will become zero waste. If this happens, do we need to continue to lease a dumpster?
That question I will also take under advisement. And as I say, it would be helpful if you email to BACP outreach at cityofchicago.org with that question, but I've taken note of it and we'll look into that.
Okay. So they're a little confused with this one, Max. What is the actual changes? Is it only for establishments and food stations that sell food or caters food? Just a little confused on what the ordinance is accomplishing.
So let me try to answer that. So yeah, the ordinance is at a basic level simply requiring that in connection with any delivery or takeout order, that the establishment offer an option for the customer to request single-use foodware, and B, that single-use foodware only be provided upon that request. And as I mentioned, it applies to food dispensing establishments, which are fixed locations. So think restaurants, taverns, cafeterias, whatnot. A fixed location that is providing food or beverage. And so if you're at a fixed location that's providing food or beverage, and there is a delivery or takeout order, and you're offering single-use foodware, the customer has to be provided the option A to ask for that single-use foodware, and B, if they do ask for it, that it might be provided, but if they don't ask for it, that it not be provided. That's what the ordinance requires, and I hope that answers your question.
Delivery apps like DoorDash are required to have a question within their app if they would like single-use foodware. I think they was just letting us know it wasn't really a question. And that's all of the questions I see for right now at Max. Oh, here's another one. Must a restaurant provide single-use foodware as an option at all?
No, it's not. The ordinance does not create that requirement.
Okay, I don't see no more questions. I'm waiting. I don't see anything else.
All right. Well, thank you, Stella, and thank you for joining today's webinar. As a reminder, today's webinar has been recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP for future viewing. All information about the single-use foodware ordinance is available at chicago.gov/BACP. As I say, click on that licensing icon, go to trending topics, click on single-use foodware, and you will find the various resources there. Questions that we were unable to get to today or any additional questions, please email bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. That's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Thank you.